I know school districts are separate, but same, I mean, buses now gotta drive all the way out there to get, the and, okay, that makes
It's
sense.
not that far for Tenino's purposes, but
Right.
you multiply that across the city of Olympia or Spokane or Lacey, yeah, and where you have these or gated communities and, so that's the sprawl you see. And the sprawl really also talks about separating the uses, so residential's over there and commercial's over there and industrial's over there and our ballparks and our schools are over here, and now the only way you can get to any of them is, 10-minute drive.
Sure.
And infills try to say, all right, well, maybe we have a walkable school, or maybe we have a walkable park, or maybe our commercial areas in proximity to our higher density multifamily, instead of putting these garden apartments out on the edges.
Yep.
Where everyone has to park, you got 1.5 stalls per unit, and somebody's got a carport that's assigned to them, and they hop in the car and, go down the arterial, hop on the interstate, and they don't interact with the community at all.
Very
I kinda had a question
Oh, go ahead.
The lot split that we approved
Mhm.
for, I think it was Hedden, right?
Yeah, okay.
So I was kinda curious about why was that the purpose if somebody wants to then build on a
Well,
separate lot?
yeah,
Would that be an infill?
They built 2 houses
Yeah.
instead of 1.
Yeah, so if there was a lot that is already, I don't know what the configuration of that lot was,
It
but
was just a big rectangle.
yeah, it was probably something like that, right? And there was already a nice little, home.
I don't think there were any.
But even if there was a home like that on one of them and they had combined the lot, they could have segged it back out, and now you got that vacant lot back there.
That you can infill.
Yeah.
But the infill lots, that's where people wanna live, right? As opposed to the meadows. Or is it-
I think there's something
Why-
to be said to allowing choice and allowing both, right?
Yeah, sure.
Cause some people they want,
They want
more land,
they
or
want
they want
city
something new,
services,
or they
they don't
want,
want to be in the city.
or they want a little bit of a yard, or there's,
Yeah, I guess so.
I'm all for giving people choices.
No, I think people should have choices.
Yeah.
I just feel like, you were saying it's more expensive
What is
to do the infill lots, but I feel like
It's more
people
expensive for
probably
the
want those
developer
better.
because
They're more desirable lots, from my perspective, that's just me.
yeah, it's typically more expensive for a developer if they look at it, compared to, because the onesie twosies are a lot
Oh,
more
if you're building
inefficient than trying to do,
18 houses at the same
25
time.
homes.
And you look at D.R. Horton, right, where they're building 500 homes, and it's just
Yeah.
it's a
And
Henry Ford.
every fourth unit.
Right, I guess you
looks-
can obviously make a lot more money like that.
Right, and they just
But what
snap
they
them
do is
up.
they pass a lot of that maintenance costs, cause they turn the roads over to the city, they turn the water lines over to the city, and then everything fails at once, right? If you ever have a development that you build all the houses at once and they all have 25-year roofs,
Oh, sure.
what's gonna happen?
Yeah, right.
20 years in, 18 years in, it's like.
Every
fail,
neighbor
fail,
starts
fail,
getting
fail.
roofs.
And unless they have the means to replace the roof, then now you start seeing the entirety of that subdivision start to lose its quality all
Sure.
at once.
Sure.
Instead of like, oh, he just doesn't mow his lawn, and you do, and I paint my house, and so we got kind of one guy who we're kind of shamed into doing the right thing.
Right.
But, if his roof is failing and, your gutters are falling off and, my house needs a paint job all at the same time.
Then I don't feel so
Yeah,
bad
and
because
you don't
everyone
let
else is
those
in the
guys
same
roll,
Right,
boat.
justify it,
Yeah, and it's like,
They call it a broken window syndrome. That's kind of what the
Ah.
Chamber of Commerce people call it, that like one broken window leads to another broken
Sure.
window, leads to, busted in door, leads to,
Course.
failing gutters.
So, and on the flip side, what's really interesting, so we remodel houses, and I can't tell you how many times we'll get a house on a street, and we start working on it, and it's amazing how, we're working on it, and then that neighbor all of a sudden does something,
Get
and then
motivated
that,
at
yeah,
the
you know what I'm
same
saying?
time, yeah.
Right, yeah, they're like, well, maybe I should do a little landscaping, so it goes both ways, right?
Well, that's why I
That's the
stick a little
worst
sign
case.
out there that says, contractor.
Right.
If they're like, hey, maybe you can come and look at my place.
Totally.
It's done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to keep moving on this, are there a couple others we can maybe identify? I think I've got 3 right now. I've got a GMA one, I've got a SEPA checklist kind of examples, and we've got a TRPC discussion on sustainable thirst in particular. We've got a historic preservation brief. the sustainability in action, maybe that would be a follow-up to what we hear from TRPC, so we could plug that in later, because I don't think the end all be all to the community sustainability is this regional first approach, right?
So the only other one is, I hear the word annexation all the time. Is that anything that would be the annexation procedures? Is that anything we really need to know?
Yeah, for sure, I think, what annexation means is that's how you get non-city land into the city, right?
Right.
And so and there's like three classes or three types of land. There's city-owned property, there's urban growth areas, which are kind of markers on a map of where the city will eventually grow, and then there's unincorporated county, right? That's kind of how the layout works. So city, UGAs, and county. And what happens is if the UGAs, before they get to develop at a certain density, they have to be annexed into the city. Because again, you've got this line between urban development and rural development. Urban development has city streets and city water and sewer.
Right.
Urban density is
And
more.
urban density, which, urban density is supposed to be about 4 units an acre. So if you're developing half-acre lots, that's not urban density, and presumably you could get dinged by the regulators, right? And on the flip side, you're probably not supposed to do like 10 units an acre in the county, because then you have sewer septic issues, right?
Sure.
There's ways around that, there's county tools you can use that we won't really worry about because we're not a county. But generally speaking, 4 units inside the city is the minimum, and less than 4 outside the city. So the UGA is the area you grow into, and the way you grow into it is annexation. And that's when, I don't know, was it 2 years ago, John, that we did the West Tenino annexation?
No, that
No,
was back in.
it was like 2008 or
Yeah.
7 or something.
Been almost a decade.
Okay, and that's what moved us out there, but
That's what, yeah.
But
yeah.
I've been talking to you guys about that for 2 years since. Look at our UGAs, because we gotta go somewhere.
Right, so the annexation's like the opposite, not quite the diametric opposite, but it's different than infill, right? So infill says, hey, we wanna bring our density and try to populate within the area that we have. Annexation is, we're gonna go pull that and add that to our city.
sure.
With an invitation
Right.
to spoil.
And so when the Hidden Meadows project was contemplated, a requirement of that was you have to be in the city, and if you're not in the city, we're gonna annex you. And then there's tools related to how that annexation procedure works.
So does usually an annexation come, it would have to come before the sprawl, right? Like,
Yep.
so someone
Ideally.
wants to do a big
Yeah.
development, so then we
But they-
talk about it.
But it lets them build more houses than they would be
If they were.
it's in their interest to bring it into the city.
Sure.
They can make more money.
Right, because, and now they have to connect to sewer.
Right.
Because now they can build at 10 units an acre instead of 3 units an acre.
Sure.
And they just, connect all their houses to a septic, to the sewer pipe instead of having to do a on-site septic system, which is expensive for them, and maintenance for the landowners and all this stuff, and sewer's a pretty easy way to go if it's available.
Does the city have any actual jurisdiction in the UGA, or is it just on paper? We think we might wanna go there, but.
I'd have to check what the interlocal says between Tenino and Thurston County. Different jurisdictions in the county work that differently. The UGA can be, it's like a joint planning area, because in most UGAs, and in all UGAs, it's still in the county, right? If it wasn't in the county, it'd be in your city and you would have had to annex it. Lacey, in a number of places, has an agreement with the county where they say, our zoning applies, and we jointly process the permit when it comes through the door. So like right now, we're doing on Martin Way is a really good example, because that Martin Way corridor, in Lacey, most of it is in the county.
So weird, pockets.
So like Winco, county,
Oh, really?
yep.
And that's a
really
heavily
strange. It's really strange.
Populated,
Sonic.
dense area.
Sonic is in the county,
Oh, interesting.
yep. It's in the UGA, but it's in the county.
Why not annex it?
Sometimes because of where it's at, like if you can't just annex little pockets, because you can't create islands of city, you need to have contiguous boundaries and they need to make sense. And so part of the annexation discussion here is this boundary review board, which is made up of the county. And so the county, and people can protest and different agencies can argue about that. So you can't just like annex, and those are also I mean, they're, the way the revenue structures work, Winco makes the county a lot of money because there's a lot of sales tax there, or some sales tax, I guess it's grocery, but, you know, Sonic makes the county a lot of money, and so why would they be in a hurry to allow the city of Lacey to annex? Because once that gets annexed in, all that revenue is gone. So there's arrangements in an annexation process for revenue sharing, so that it's more of a glide path versus a full stop.
Okay.
Yeah, so annexation, I don't think Tenino has to worry about those things with the county all of a sudden designating a portion of
Sure.
Old Highway 99 as commercial and letting some big box go in there. I think they'd have a challenge on that in a situation like Martin Way where you already had urban development. I mean, Martin Way is the old state highway, right? They used to come in from Seattle and all the way through Tacoma and all the way through here, right?
Right, oh, yeah.
And so, that development pattern was kind of accepted and it's one of the few commercial developments that the county gets revenue off of. There's no revenue off of any of this stuff with the county.
Can I ask, what's up with Grand Mound? Like,
So
how-
Grand
how can
Mound
they
and
plan to
Rochester
do all
are
that?
unincorporated, and they have kind of plans to maybe, they're called a Lammard. That's the term for it.
Lammard?
Lamird, or RID, I can't, the spelling is, it's a local area of more intense rural development. So it's a funny little thing out of GMA that says we recognize that, yes, there's unincorporated county, and yes, there's cities, but there's also pockets in counties
because
of
that's
like
always been
development
sort
that
of
are
the-
not cities, right?
They're
And
not
it's like
big
a
enough to be
it's like a
efficient in the
pre-city.
city, yeah.
It's like a pre-city. So Rochester, people think of Rochester as its own school district, but it's not, it's nowhere. It's part of a county. It's just the Rochester area. Grand Mound's the same way.
What about Rainier? Is Rainier?
Rainier's a
This is
city.
yeah.
Oh, it is a city, okay.
So Rainier, Tenino, Yelm,
Dakota?
Lacey,
Yeah,
Olympia,
it's a city.
Tumwater,
Dakota's a city.
Dakota,
We'll go to the town.
and that's it.
Oh, it is?
The
It's
county.
not a city?
Right, and so it's got, that comes back to this like class of this annexation procedures, like, first, second, third, fourth class municipalities. John knows more about that than I do, but they're different forms of government.
What's really weird about the classes of towns, right, since they implemented the code city, the 35 Alpha chapter, doesn't matter anymore. You know, a city's a city's a city, unless you're a big friggin' city.
A charter,
Yeah.
code church, like a charter city.
Yeah.
You,
Well,
that's
It'd be like
basically
Olympia.
Uh,
Or like
Well, I'm
Seattle.
kinda like Seattle.
yeah, so like they
Seattle.
write their own constitution,
write-
sort of
yeah.
like, right, so they get to organize under different
But,
ways.
you know, you're back to the Growth Management Act. They wrote the act so that slowly but surely, more and more cities are having to plan under the act, right? Not all cities have to plan under it, so they count, when you go to that class, that's what they'll say. If your city is planning under the Growth Management Act, well, we are.
Yeah, you know,
And everybody's going to sooner or later. And so, they amended the act to make annexation on the part of the cities easier. I mean, there were, you know, wars, there were hostile takeovers by cities of some, you know, it's the stuff that Dan's talking about. You know, the counties don't wanna lose the revenue. You know, who's gonna say no to more money? It's not so much that the cities are out there, you know, acting, oh, we gotta grow so we can make more money. No, they need more land so that they can service their citizens better. And yes, revenue is a part of that, because we have to provide the service, so, you know, the way the state of Washington works is, everything's about who provides the service, who's gonna get the money. So there's these little interlocal agreements that get crafted to allow a smooth transition from county to city. Yes, they're still out there, but if this planning commission decides to start shaping Tenino's environment in terms of lines on the map, the county can't say no to us.
Yeah, they can protest, which is what that boundary review board does, and it can get frustrating, but, the main method of annexation is through, a vote of the people being annexed.
Right. And
Sure.
if the people say, yeah, we want it, the county can't stop it.
Yeah, okay.
And the harder part is when there's like a single property owner that, you know, so down on 93rd, up here on 93rd, that used to be in Tumwater's UGA. And a couple property owners at that interchange of 93rd and I-5 said, we're ready to be annexed, right?
It used to be in the county,
Yeah, what did I say?
you said Tumwater, but it doesn't matter.
But it was in Tumwater, in Tumwater's UGA.
Ah, okay.
And they were ready to be brought into the city because they wanted to do a big truck stop, you know, McDonald's, Subway, Pilot, you know,
Yeah,
that whole
all that
thing there. And the stuff across the street on the west side of the interstate, all Puget Western's property, which is now in the tribe's hands.
Oh, is
And-
it?
Oh, is that why it's languishing?
Yep.
Where that other truck stop
Yeah.
was?
Used to be.
They're gonna put another truck stop in there.
Oh, I thought so.
But so they wanted to go into the county, into the city, and they filed, and they were moving that way, and the boundary was drawn, and the county protested. They said, no, we're not, that's not right, they're not connecting the sewer right away, or whatever all the issues were, so, but, like John said, it happened, and they moved into the city, and there's pockets of annexation. This city could continue to annex down Skookumchuck if they wanted.
Towards Bucota, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and down, you know, those are viable, those are what we're talking about. You gotta be careful how big and how fast and, you know, what you do. And so I would submit that on chapter 10, A, B, and C are probably what I'd cover on that, what we could cover. Kind of, you know, why, how to evaluate a proposal and what the consequences look like, and those are well within your realm to review.
I think that sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about transportation planning? Is that ever something that,
Yeah, and I think that's a big deal with the state highway running through your front door here, which is not that unusual for small towns. Most small towns are built around state highway. Most of the small towns we plan in have state highways. I'd have to think about how to craft a discussion on that was really relevant to you, to Tenino. Because some of the statewide stuff is just too big to really be relevant. You're scrunching your
I
nose.
think Miss Parsons, if I remember right, you know, she could come down and talk about the STIP or the TIP, either one. We gotta go through that every year.
So what John's talking about is there's a statewide spreadsheet that has projects on it with costs, you know, and it's an approved, a TIP stands for a Transportation Improvement Plan, or program, depending on how you're working. And there's one at the state level, there's one at the local level.
And that's just what they're planning in the future to tackle?
Yeah, it's
Well, how that
basically like
process
a
works.
work plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm surprised that CFPs aren't in here, John. Are TIPs, is your CIP in here?
I didn't see that in there, but what I was gonna suggest, first of all, I think you're structuring it correctly, right? Look at the Growth Management Act, you know, because that's your planning constraints. And, you know, seek to understand the precepts and then apply it to our comp plan.
Sure.
So you go through and what you would notice, so I gotta back way up. The Growth Management Act was very well written as an act, right, as a statute. It's very well written. And somebody who wrote it was a planner that had some operational experience, because what they said was, here are 13 things that you should consider when you're planning, and we are not going to prioritize it. You are going to prioritize them at your level. and then the cookie cutters all came out. And that's what this is. This is a cookie cutter approach to the planning. Because there are things in there that, I'm not gonna say don't apply to Tenino, but there's things in there that Tenino would do differently, that we should do differently. And there are things that should be in there that aren't, because they weren't important to the cookie cutter, you know, the guy who made the cookie cutter. That's our Arts Commission. We want to bring economic development in there. But look at your, you know, this course, the way they put it out, right? I mean, it's, there's not a lot of finesse in here. What does it say? The primacy of the comprehensive plan. It drives everything in the city.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the vision, kind of
Right.
of the community.
Sure.
So
If
that's why-
it is not linked to this plan, we ought not to be doing it. And if we're doing it because we must, and it's not in this plan, we need to get it in the plan.
Yeah, and that's why what they will hit on tomorrow is, you know, the legal aspects of GMA and then the role of the public process. Why it's so important, because this is supposed to be the community's vision of the plan. So, you know, your question about roads and then my follow-up with, you know, the capital facilities plan, that's probably like a, you know, session 8 or 9. I think those are probably when we want to get into infrastructure, maybe we'll just hit an infrastructure topic. And then, you know, I agree with what John's saying, is make sure that we're thinking about everything we're talking about as we go through. So infill discussion, that's a housing, you know,
Yeah.
discussion, SEPA's a natural resources, the land use, that there's annexation discussions in there. And I think we're on our way. And so what we're doing is we're building your expertise, your understanding of these issues. So when we have to come back and update this comp plan, which, you know, will need to be probably 3 years from now, you're ready to go on that. And you kind of know where to drive at and make some changes and ask for community input on, you know, wastewater treatment systems or transit service or, you know, natural gas services, whatever it is you seize on. You know, maybe it's sign code, maybe it's wayfinding, maybe it's historic district, maybe it's community improvement, whatever it ends up being.
But that's what you're talking about, to me, that's part of the art. You know, there's an intensive effort that every 10 years you have to update your plan, right? I think we're kind of moving slowly that way. But every year you have an opportunity to adjust the plan to conditions that have changed, to include the desires of the populace, right? So in your mind, when you keep hearing us talking about updating the plan, understand that there are 2 distinct processes that we're talking about updating the plan. One is some comprehensive thing where you're gonna sit down and take the time and go through it from soup to nuts and address every single flaw you can find at that time. And the second plan is like a rolling yearly update. You get to do it once a year. Not saying you have to, but if something comes up that you need to make an adjustment in the plan, because the plan drives everything, like funding, it's better to update the plan as soon as you can see that there's going to be a funding shortfall.
Right. And I agree, John, with what you're saying. I don't think chapter 3 here handles that stuff too well. So I'll just make sure to talk about kind of, you know, and maybe they hit it in the book, because there is, you know, 40 pages worth of content there more in that first section, but how, you know, how to change the comp plan and kind of what the expectation is on what's called a comprehensive plan amendment.
Yeah.
And that's what John's talking about, and that's different from what's called a comprehensive plan update. The update is the state saying, go forth and make sure, you know, your plan is consistent with all the stuff that's happened in the last X number of years since you touched your plan last. And so some places like, oh, we do that every year, we're good, right? And other places are like, yeah, we haven't touched our comp plan in a decade, we have a lot of work to do.
Sure.
Well, and I would much rather we be in that group that says, you know, we've done it, we've done it every year. You know, our comp plan update is gonna be, you know, and you.
And so there are things that trigger, that you can only do in a comp plan setting, and there's things that, which means only once a year. The way the plan says, or the way that GMA says is unless there's an emergency, you can't be changing your comp plan, your vision document every couple weeks.
Sure.
Right? Because you get one window, or you get one opportunity for the community to say, this is our chance to tweak the plan. And that tweak can be, it can be a comprehensive tweak, it can be a full scale, it doesn't have to be a single subject. You know, it can be widespread.
Sure.
And it could be, you wanna change something, you wanna change something different, she wants to change something different, and we talk about all those issues, and we say yes, yes, no, right? That's okay. And many cities, that's why they have a docket process, so everybody brings their applications forward and they kind of queue them up, and then you spend, 5 or 6 meetings going through and hearing from the person who wants to change the map color from yellow to blue, right? And why that may or may not make sense, and does it match up with the other vision of the document, or yes or no. So that's one series of change, to change the comp plan map. Sometimes you can make changes to the zoning and the development code without having to change the comp plan. So a quick example of that is if you've got 2 types of residential zones, like single-family residential zones, and one says maybe duplexes and triplexes and single-family, and the other one just says single-family duplexes, and they have standards with them. You could change within, you could move a color on a map from a light red to a dark red without having to change the big map, because the big map just says, hey, that whole area is single-family.
Okay.
So the big designation on that says single family, and then the zoning code parses it up like this, and as long as you stay in those categories and you move from 2 to 3 or 1 to 4 or whatever, and you're still in that single family category, you probably don't have to change the comp plan. You may just have a text change. You may wanna add duplexes to the single family, zone to allow duplexes now, and then otherwise detached single family zone. And as long as it's not inconsistent with the vision, the goals, then you don't need to tweak this vision document.
Sure, because you're staying within the parameters.
Because this is like, your guiding principles, and this thing over here is how you implement this.
Okay,
Right, so we'll talk about at next meeting about how you implement this,
cool.
because there's about three little levers you can do. So, I think we hammered that pretty good.
Yeah.
I think we
That's
have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 major subjects. So I've got GMA, then like project review / NEPA checklist, or SEPA checklist. And then I've got, something, at some point talk about annexation procedures. I got chapter 10, A, B, and C. Sustainable Thurston discussion, infill discussion with like A and B is what I marked on that, chapter 12 at A and B. I think those are probably the good spots to start, and then historic preservation. So that's like, how many, that's 6 or 7?
Yep.
That'll push you into spring at least, depending on how well we get all those.
People's schedules for coming in and speaking meetings.
Yeah, get a couple folks in here.
So as we move into this, are we still starting the meeting, our gathering at 6?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, so I think maybe 30 minutes, maybe try to keep it to 30 minutes.
Yes, I like that.
30 minutes.
So we still come in, do all the opening meeting stuff, and then we'll just go to this for half an
Breakout,
hour.
right.
And then we'll go back to our seats and do our whatever
Like right now, you
business.
probably have to go back and hit the gavel and call us quits.
Yes, we can do that. Ah. Oh, are you gonna do it for me?
The mobile gavel.
Nice. Meeting adjourned.
All right.
Good one.
Good plan.
Yeah, I like this. This is
Yeah,
gonna be
me
good.
too. I think it'll be really helpful.
Yep. And then maybe we'll key up some things to do, work items, instead of just talking about stuff. Maybe we'll do some stuff next, late spring.
Did you intend for us to keep it?
Yeah, you keep those.
Nice.
Do people from planning commissions ever go to the Paul Randy's boot camps, or is that primarily
Yep.
employees?
Yep, the PAW is a planning association in Washington. It's kind of more of a grassroots long-standing, and it's a little more rural and regional than what is the APA Washington. So the APA, American Planning Association Washington chapter is like the big national chapter. There's chapters in all 50 states. So they, my opinion is AP is a little more Puget Sound dominated and big city, and they talk about stuff that doesn't really go in. You know, some things are important, like equity issues are important, and homelessness are important, but sometimes like cities like this side are dealing with like fundamental, like how do we keep this business open, or I feel like AP is a little bit bigger city issues, and PAW deals with more rural places, more rural counties, small town, a lot more small towns. Small town in Puget Sound is like, 8, 9, 10,000. Small town, the rest of the state is like 1,200. Ritzville, Washtuckna, Tenino.
So real quick, tomorrow, Winlock?
Winlock, the Oliqua Community Center, I think it's at 6 o'clock. Is it right, 6:30?
Or 6:30, I think.
6:30 to 9:15.
I think you sent her
I
an
sent
email.
an email.
Did you get into your email?
What I need to do is I think what I'm having a problem with is, what's the end of my email? It's, Planning Commission 5 at,
ci.tenino.
okay, cause I was copying exactly what's at the end of yours, and it's still not letting me in.
No, I busted right into it. I pulled it up on a different computer and
And it went right in.
went right in.
Maybe you got the wrong password.
Okay, let me see, I've been doing it from my home laptop.
Or you can download the Office 365 app on there, that's what I do,
Okay.
because that way it never touches my machine. Yeah, it's free.
The Microsoft Office? Outlook?
Yes,
I
Outlook.
don't know why I'm doing that, I was just looking at the email itself. I'm trying to find the email I sent.
Oh, I'll take care of all that, Aaron, don't worry about it.
Are you sure?
Yeah, that's why I get a paycheck.
Chair
I
guy?
feel bad leaving it to.
I'll let that down, but I can move back there.
Yeah, 6:15 to 9:15.
Yeah, that's what they normally, I don't know why they pick the 15s, but they always do that.
6:15 to 9:15.
6:15.
I'll let you take that up for Corey.
Okay, thanks.
Good night.
Yes, Aaron. Damn it.
That was exciting. So can I just sign in with just Planning Commission 5? Or do I have to put at
Yeah, you gotta do that.
CI?
.tenino .wa .us. Let's see what it does. Not office, no, yeah, there
Oh,
it is.
there we go. So I remember what it was.
No, cause I changed it. Now I gotta remember what the hell I changed it to. Is it doing it? No. Okay, I'll have her reset it. That,
Okay.
but that,
I got the app now.
You got it.
You know, I would think I should be so much more up on this whole technology thing, but oh my goodness, sometimes.
That's why you get a paycheck.
Sometimes I just need to give it to my daughter. Okay, well gentlemen, thank you.
Good seeing you.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Have a good night.
You too.
All right. Good meeting.
Yeah, thanks. I got a call from, Larry Johnson, who's doing I think a short plat out there